Good afternoon and welcome back to the Atlantic Council live from IMF World Bank Week here in Marrakesh, Morocco. On behalf of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center and our South Asia Center, it is my pleasure to welcome India's Minister of Finance, Nirmala Sitharaman. Thank you for being with us today. I know how busy your schedule is. Minister, I want to start with reflections from India's G20. Just came out of a successful G20. The world was in New Delhi for the experience. What were your reflections coming out of it? And now as India finishes its G20 presidency year and hands the torch to Brazil?
Well, first, thank you for having me here. Marrakesh has had the last of the finance ministers meeting, central bank governors meeting, during India's presidency. Today we completed it, and I'm extremely happy to say G20 has given a glimmer of hope to this world, especially at a time when you think multilateral institutions cannot take any decisions, they can't deliver, they are there as stock shops and nothing more. But actually, I think in the last few years, to the credit of all those presidencies, like Indonesia earlier before us, there's been a lot of steadying of views, consultation, taking everybody on board, trying to arrive at a consensus and so on. So we have learned from those attempts, and our presidency, therefore, the sense of wanting to deliver was on everybody's mind. So it's not just the credit of Indian presidency, but I think the members felt that this is the best opportunity to come out showing that world we can take the decisions where it matters, whether it is debt or any other issue. I can elaborate as we go on. But I think that is the satisfaction that I get out of India's presidency, where the leaders agreed to have a declaration in Delhi. There was a communique out of the finance track today. So all this augurs well for the future.
I appreciate what you said about multilateralism and the need for multilateralism. That's a theme here at the IMF World Bank meetings and certainly a key part of the G20. One of the major objectives of India's G20 was to highlight voices of the global south. We heard this from Prime Minister Modi. How do you feel that objective was met? This is such a large part of the world. Sometimes that phrase, global south, is almost strange because it's most of the world.
That's right.
It's hard to bring so many different voices together. Do you think that objective was met?
Absolutely, and I would think it has also set the tone for the forthcoming G20 presidencies, getting African Union into a permanent seat in the G20. It's not as if we started it and we finalized it. It has been hanging fire for a very long time. So for the G20 to have come together to say, yes, it's time for African Union to come now, gives us immense satisfaction, because those are the kind of things we aimed at when the Prime Minister held in December of last year a virtual conference with all the global south countries, as you say. Yes, they are across continents, across seas, and their problems are comparable problems. And if I could pick on the observation that you made, they are a vast bulk, very different in their language and creed and everything else, but the problems which they face are fundamentally the same. And the opposite of it is the few who are together, not the global south, but the few who are together. I don't want to use the global north, but those developed countries are not anywhere in comparison to the numbers that you're talking about, the number of countries and also the population that they hold.
No, I fully understand what you're saying. This is why sometimes the terminology almost seems strange.
That's right, but we were able to get some kind of a unison on issues, particularly on attending to debt vulnerabilities in time. That is something which the IMF and the World Bank and all of them are very much intensely feeling about it, but I've got a formulation to do it now. And the round table on global sovereign debt has set the tone for it. It's an institution which can carry forward and come up with timely solutions.
I want to come back to the issues of global sovereign debt, some of the negotiations happening here, quota issues, because this also gets into representation of a large part of the world and their role in the IMF and World Bank. But first I want to talk about India's economy. This is, as the managing director of the IMF has said, one of the bright spots in the world economic outlook. Upwards revisions again for Indian GDP, I think 6.3% in 2023. What do you 2023, 24, thank you. What do you see as the composition of that growth? What's underlying that growth in India?
I think globally we are seeing countries seeing transition from the old kind of doing business, old kind of production, old kind of industries and so on, to the knowledge-driven industries. Now India is no exception. And also the new age industries where even your energy requirements are coming through renewable, which itself is bringing newer questions, newer technologies, newer kind of people who will have to service it and so on. So you find the transition from the old ways of doing things to the newer, more efficient, more energy, more climate friendly ways of doing things are catching up. So in India, so what are the kind of things which are going to bring in that growth that we are aspiring to have and about which the IMF has given its predictions? India still holds strong on agriculture. The world's food need, first of all, for the population that we have 1.4 billion, we are almost self-sufficient in most of the food grains, most of the edibles, most of the things which matter like milk, oil and so on. Edible oil we still import some because of the nature of oils which different regions of India use. And we still import some beans and pulses because that's our staple, and not enough is being produced. But then we are the biggest millet producers also now. So as regards agriculture, which is self-sufficiency, we are one of the biggest procurers of defense equipments. But today we are exporting defense equipments. In the name of Make in India, a lot of incentives were given for Indian industries. Make in India has therefore shown this difference. And most of those who are producing and selling components for original equipment manufacturers outside belong to the medium and small industries bracket. So they're all over the country. It's not as if there is one big unit which produces, which the spillover of that doesn't reach all parts of the country. It's not that. It is more in situ, a lot of MSMEs doing it. So defense production, renewable energy, we have set high targets for ourselves in Paris COP21, but well before the time we have achieved the nationally determined commitments, and with funds generated on our own. We have not borrowed, we have not taken money from other, the so-called 100 billion has never reached us, but we funded our own transition in terms of moving to renewable energy. So, and India is also building knowledge of excellence for centers in artificial intelligence. Our software and our hardware engineers are doing a lot of big work around the globe. We have the global capability centers, as they call it, GCCs. India has more than 45% of the global GCCs located in India. And 50% of all those who are running GCCs outside are manned by manned or womaned by Indian staffers and so on. So what is going to give this growth, what is going to contribute to our growth is not only agriculture, services, not only services, manufacturing as well.
It seems like what you're describing is a sort of all of the above economy, traditional agriculture, services, IT, AI, a mix of new and traditional forms that are underlying growth.
Yes, India is also the biggest pharma industry hub. We produce world's 60% of the vaccines which are used all over the world. And we also are big in generic drugs manufacturing.
What risk do you see to global growth and India's growth? I mean, we think about China's slowdown, we think about geopolitical risks. I heard this from Finance Minister Le Maire of France recently. The geopolitical risk is the greatest risk on the horizon. How do you see risk either to India's growth or global growth?
That's right. France's Finance Minister Bruno has been talking about, Bruno Le Maire has been talking about it. And he is right, because the global challenges are the ones on which everybody is talking about it. But whose actual action is going to make a difference to it, or is it got to be a collective action by so many different countries? These are imponderables at the moment, but we have to brace ourselves for it.
So I want to go back to where you were starting before about debt, the Global Debt Roundtable. This has been a big theme of the meetings. I interviewed Zambia's finance minister earlier this week. I know we don't have an MOU yet, but we're hopeful that one will be signed soon. How do you see progress on debt restructuring happening? As you said, major breakthrough at the G20, and we hope that continues here at the IMF World Bank meetings.
I remember starting discussions on this when we took over in our presidency, because we also said this is going to be one of the major items on our list of agenda. At that time, there was still a certain sense of pessimism, saying this has been waiting for 2 years or 3 years and so on. Zambia, Chad, Ghana. So most of these countries were sort of giving up in desperation, saying we are not sure when this is going to happen. But thankfully, both IMF and the World Bank, together with India, sat together and devised, saying there should be a way in which we go back to our own drawing boards and getting this addressed. The creditor committees were also formed, and quickly, like the one which was formed for Sri Lanka, between France, Japan, us and the IMF and World Bank, all of us were sitting and talking about how to address it. So action followed our concern each time. And within the matter of 9-10 months, which since we took over, we've had solutions coming to these countries. So it's more speedily responding to those who are in despair. The longer you delay, the more complicated even resolving it will become.
I remember well when India took over the G20 presidency, there was a lot of skepticism that we would have progress. As you said, it had been stalled for a long time, and now we're at the cusp of at least the first of hopefully more debt
All three of them at least,
yes.
And then the kind of template that IMF has given itself, I'm sure it's going to be able to redress others' problems speedily.
Something we'll all continue to track closely.
That's right, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about IMF quotas. This is a big issue here at these meetings. We're in the quadrennial review of quotas. U.S. Treasury Undersecretary Jay Shambaugh gave a speech in Washington several weeks ago calling for an equiproportional increase. This is one of the words of the week. How does India see it? And going back to where you started, highlighting voices and concerns of the global South.
The larger issues about representation in these bodies, particularly the IMF, for most of the countries who are otherwise not adequately represented, still remain. But given the fact that 15th December 2023 is literally the deadline for that review to complete, I think this suggestion which came from the US has been accepted, at least an immediate temporary solution. Temporary in the sense that's a solution for now. But how are we going to address this issue is something which in the next presidency some discussions will happen. But the equiproportional share, equiproportional quota seems to be the less contentious way of addressing it for now, because it doesn't alter the share proportions, and therefore it's at least some more money without upsetting the balance.
And at least it's not nothing happening at the end of the review.
Right.
So you think it's been accepted broadly by the membership?
Even I, from my side, did openly say yes, we will support it.
Okay, something we'll look forward to tomorrow in the IMFC communique and the concluding documents. I wanted to ask you about this idea, which has captured a lot of attention in Washington, of de-dollarization or diversification away from the dollar. Of course, India, a founding member of the BRICS, this was a topic at the BRICS summit recently in South Africa. How do you see this issue? I think there's maybe a lot of confusion about it, what it means, what the motivations are.
For a minute, I'll keep the BRICS aside and say the way in which we've been looking at it and also taking some steps towards it is that for countries, particularly those in Africa, those in, let's say, the Pacific, some of the island countries, there is a serious problem of not having enough dollars to pay for what they essentially need. And we have seen this lasting for more than a desirable time. So we have moved in those kind of circumstances to say that you can pay in your local currency, provided of course India and the local currency can establish some kind of an equation or a ratio. Paying in local currency is the way in which we are looking at addressing countries which are otherwise stuck in a, dead end. Actually, they can't go back, they can't go forward, but we need to give them some redressal. So with India, there is a lot of interest on this topic. A lot of countries are talking to us. Equally, we are also talking to countries which can have payment systems, digital payment systems, which, if it were to be compatible with one another, payment systems can also happen digitally,
yes.
Therefore promoting it more efficiently, real time, and so on. Even on that, we are taking a lot of steps to talk to countries, and I think today, if I'm not wrong, over 20 countries are in discussion with us.
It's so interesting what you said about payment systems. I've heard a lot of conversation about that here at these meetings. India, of course, a leader. UPI, what they've done on payment systems, and now central bank digital currencies, both retail and wholesale. How do you see those projects?
The central bank retail and wholesale has been sandboxed. Mm-hmm. They've tested it. Yeah. The retail has actually had quite a lot of acceptance in the citizens themselves, who have already accepted QR code based payments, who have already accepted, let's say, the RuPay card. Yeah. So from a card, from cash to checkbook to card to then coming over to paying digitally using QR. And now you don't even need a QR, it is happening via phone to phone. So today your phone has become so versatile because the technology is easy and smooth to use, but it is being very readily adapted by Indian citizens of different backgrounds, urban, rural, fully educated, not so well educated, partly educated, skilled, not skilled, take it, man, woman, everything. Because we were able to do it in the regional languages. Messages went in regional languages. Money deposited in your account, alerted in your regional language. Not required smartphone, you can do it in simple feature phones and so on. So these are kind of things on which the Prime Minister has been actively engaged. He's very tech savvy. He loves to use those kind of gadgets. Why today, 25, 30 years, he used all those precursors to today's instruments as and when they came. So he has that gut instinct that a common citizen is not going to be ours when it is not, when the mystic feeling about it is removed. You make it simple, you break it down to his language, his instrument, his access, then it is a success. And it was proved to be a success. Because we were able to do it in that kind of a scale and proportion and made it acceptable to all kinds of people, today we are confidently able to tell countries which need the technology or the knowledge systems that we are willing to extend it to them.
That's what I was going to ask, is sharing those learnings with other countries, because so many countries are exploring this technology.
That's right. And that has now reached so many different, it's not just confined to the payments world. Even during the vaccine, we issued the vaccine passports through their phones. They didn't have to carry papers. Anyone traveling abroad had it on their phone, whichever phone, smartphone or any other phone. It told when they had the vaccine, which is the brand that they had, when is the next dose due, and where should they take it from. It was all there in the phone.
It's fantastic technology. I know we're short on time, you have a very busy schedule. I want to ask two final questions. First, on your goals for the rest of this, we're coming towards the end of the week, what we want to see, what does success look like from India's perspective over the next 24, 48 hours as we conclude these IMF World Bank meetings?
I think I'm speaking from the G20 experience, but the mood continues into IMF and the World Bank as well. And I don't want to speak for them, but I certainly sense, as a member of these bodies, I sense that there is a sense of responsibility, that we have to deliver it for the world. We have to tell people that we have stood up when time is calling us to do something. There's a very strong sense of wanting to be positive and responding positively. The negativity is come down, where you thought toxin was here, you were pointing it out. But today people are wanting solutions to be offered to countries and people, and on that I hear one voice.
That's a positive message.
Absolutely, and I'm very, very satisfied that is the spirit which governs all these multilateral institutions. I'm sure they will meet up with the expectations.
I hope so. Final question for you. We started with the G20. I want to end with the G20. You said the G20 is a continuing project. India hands it off to Brazil now. What advice do you give to your colleagues in Brazil? What do you hope to see now that the G20 presidency passes to Brazil?
I wouldn't call it advice, but I certainly did have a bilateral meeting with the Brazilian minister. And I said India will be ready to help, understand, and cooperate during their presidency. And it's not so much because India's presidency had these agenda, but the agenda on which consensus was arrived during India's presidency are of critical importance to the world. You just can't say this one is important and not any of this. Whether it is the digital public infrastructure so that countries become more transparent in their governance, and speedy delivery of the last mile of services happens because of that, or whether you're looking at debt distress and addressing them, or you're looking at cryptocurrencies. You have major disasters to remember, and the world requires to be on the same page in regulating. No one doing it in a silo is going to be effective, because this is technology. It cares for nothing. It cares nothing for your borders. So whether it is crypto, whether it is your debt distress, whether it is digital public infrastructure, MDB reforms, I'm so glad that all countries...
I'm glad you raised this.
So all this I did tell the Brazilian minister, saying if in any of these you need us to stand by you, help you, we are willing. So I'm sure that Brazilian presidency will deliver on all these.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining the Atlantic Council once again. We wish you best of luck at the IMF World Bank meetings. We thank everyone for joining us here today. We have programming continuing throughout this afternoon. Please stay tuned. We wish everyone a good rest of the day.